Hello family, this is African Esquire and this is the Federation of African Liberation. We are a Pan-Africanist organization that seeks to unite African people throughout the diaspora and the continent of Africa for the purpose of our mutual liberation. So if you're interested in learning more about FAL, you can follow us on Facebook, you can follow us on Instagram, but you can also look us up on YouTube. We have a new YouTube page. There's a link to that in the description. And also you can if you're interested in becoming a member, you could also sign up to become a member and check out our application materials. And just a quick announcement, we are having a study session this Sunday, the 12th, April 12th. And the session is going to be surrounding Handbook for Revolutionary Warfare. That is a book written by Kwame Nkrumah, really the father of Pan-Africanism. And he is talking back from the past, but he's saying things that really pertain to the future as far as how do we handle revolution. What does revolution look like? His recommendations for actually enacting a revolution. So we're going to be studying that with some FAL members on a live stream. That will be on the FAL YouTube. So as I stated in the past, previously, we used to have FAL live streams on African Esquire channel, but they have moved over to our YouTube channel. So you can see that link and below, follow the YouTube page, and that will show you where the live stream is going to be this Saturday. So to get to today's subject, basically, I was at work today and I got a very interesting notification, and I was so shocked to find out that someone was getting reparations. And it's not us, it's not Black people, not African people, it's not Native Americans, it's not Indigenous Australians, although they're getting some type of reparations by a court ruling, but that hasn't been enacted as far as actual payments. It's not the Chinese for things that have been done to them. It's none of these people. It's actually the people who have done the most to a continent that has had the most done to it. And that is the Europeans, former settlers of Zimbabwe, who previously owned farmland in Zimbabwe. Now, when we say owned, we have to say owned because that farmland was taken from the native Zimbabwean people, and the land was taken by people without their consent in this process of colonialism. But today, a news article came out and it turns out that these people are actually going to be entitled to some reparations from the Zimbabwean government. Now, this is crazy for a number of reasons. One, if you've been following Zimbabwe for the past year or so, you know that since Emmerson Mnangagwa became president, the country has just gone downhill, and the country was never flourishing. But under Robert Mugabe, it was doing a lot better than it was today. So under the current administration, we have a lot of people who are financially without any type of resources. These people have been rioting and protesting because the government has failed. This is, of course, a government that's more controlled by neoliberalism than the Robert Mugabe administration, because although, not to say he didn't have any type of interest with Western or Chinese interest, he was a lot more revolutionary in his approach, that he would try to do things to push for the well-being of Zimbabwe as opposed to pushing for things for the well-being of the West. Emerson Mnangagwa, on the other hand, has shown that he puts his interest for the Zimbabwe people, that the interest that he sees as most important is Western interest, even if it kills his own people and kills his own population. And as I said, you know, this is coming at a time when you have people in Zimbabwe saying, I don't even have $1 to my name. I have to borrow a quarter from my neighbor, and my neighbor needs that quarter, so they can't even give me the quarter. Like, this is going through a time of severe financial depression for the Zimbabwean people. And yet, the government of Zimbabwe has found some way, even throughout all of this financial mess, to pay Western European farmers reparations for the land that was taken from them, or really the land that was returned to the Zimbabwean people back whenever Mugabe was president. So let's read an article. This is an article on Yahoo News. And when it's on, these types of mainstream platforms, that this is a big deal to them. So maybe they feel like this is going to be a precedent inside of the Western world. So the article says Zimbabwe is to start paying compensation this year to thousands of white farmers who lost land under former President Robert Mugabe's land reform nearly 2 decades ago. The government says as it seeks to bring closure to a highly divisive issue. Let's pause right there. I think the most divisive issue should have been seen as whenever the white farmers took the land from the Zimbabwean people. Initially, that was very divisive, wasn't it? That they actually felt like they were entitled to their land for no other reason than these ideals of basically manifest destiny that makes them think that they're entitled to take whatever does not belong to other white people. So if anyone was being divisive, if anyone was doing something corrupt, that would have been the people who took the land to begin with. But as with white supremacy, as with colonialism, it's always about setting the time that we start counting when the injustice started from the time that is most convenient to neocolonial rule, that's most convenient to the Western powers. And so, of course, it would be very inconvenient to set the time that they want to start looking for justice whenever the black people were originally robbed of this land. Instead, it's more better and convenient for their narrative and for their financial security to start that timeline when they lost the land to the black people who took it back. So let's keep going. 2 decades ago, Robert Mugabe's government carried out at times violent evictions of 4,500 white farmers. Violent evictions. Again, listen to the language. And they redistributed the land to around 300,000 black families, arguing it was redressing imbalances from the colonial era. But land reform still divides public opinion, as opponents see it as a partisan process that left the country struggling to feed itself. President Emerson Mnangagwa's government, seeing the paying of compensation to white farmers as the key to mend ties with the West, and set aside $17.5 million in this year's budget. The initial payments will target those in financial distress, while full compensation will be paid later. So let's go back. 17.5 million. This is a government that's struggling. These are people who have been struggling. They haven't been able to get a good wage for most of their employers. The common man is struggling in Zimbabwe, and they elected a president who said, I see you struggling. They elected a president, right, that says, I see you struggling. I see that you can't get any money for yourself. I see that you're hungry. I see that you're basically going through a depression. I see all this, but I don't really care about that, because even though you quote unquote elected me, that's not really who elected me. The people who elected me are the people who are from the West. And if you know anything about neocolonialism, how it does exist, the West can manipulate elections or can manipulate African leaders. And they care more about that manipulation than they care about the people who supposedly elected them. So despite the fact that most people are in severe depression, are severely struggling, he would rather go back and try to make amends with the West. And by doing that, it's carved out of his very small budget, $17.5 million, to be given to whites who took the land to begin with. I want to end off on this point right here. It says, colonists seized some of the best agricultural land, and much of it remained in the hand of white farmers after its independence in 1980, while many blacks were landless. So let's talk about this from a few aspects. Obviously, this is not a democracy. Obviously, Mnangagwa is not representing the Zimbabwean people. And we've talked about this many times, the fact that the setup with these African countries, every African country, none of them are free from colonialism as it stands. All of them are ran by colonial governments. Although we've had a lot of anti-neocolonial, pan-Africanist people movements rise up on the continent as of recently, still today, the West maintains power inside of the continent of Africa. You might see black faces running government, but these black faces are not empowered to make independent decisions. The reason is because, number one, you have a entire ecosystem basically built on the fact that the West is going to benefit from the minerals of Africa, from the land of Africa, from the labor of Africa, from all things in Africa. And this will be to the disadvantage of the common people of Africa. This is what has allowed the West to continue being a power. They're not a superpower because they have strong, because they're just stronger, because they're smarter, because blah, blah, blah. They're a superpower because they have been able to maintain this power dynamic between Africa and also other parts of the world, but namely Africa. The second that this power dynamic of them controlling the wealth and the resources of Africa switches, the second that that happens, this whole setup will cease to exist, because they depend on Africa and other countries to enable to allow themselves to be the big major powers in the world. So when we have a African leader saying that I'm going to give reparations to the whites, you might look at that and say, well, what's wrong with these Zimbabwean people? Why would they allow that? Well, the fact is that it's not really them who's controlling it. It's the outsiders who are the ones pulling the strings. And we should know Mnangagwa, he's obviously had very strong ties to China. He also seeks to come in the good grace of the U.S. We know that where his allegiance is, he really wants to be favored by the U.S. He wants to be very favored by the Western powers. It's also interesting that recently the U.S. has continued to sanction Zimbabwe, despite the fact that Zimbabwe hasn't done anything anti-West, I would say, anti-Western capitalist interests since Mugabe was still in power, but for some reason they still chose to sanction Zimbabwe. So Mnangagwa is trying anything he can in order to become a puppet of the West, in order for them to accept him. It's kind of like a house Negro on the plantation who's begging the master, please, please let me be your house Negro. I'll do anything. Please let me. I want to go in the house. I don't want to be in the field. I'll do anything. That's basically what he's doing. So let's understand, first of all, that this is not the Zimbabwean people choosing to give reparations. This is one person who is looking out for himself in the long run and trying to come in the good graces of Western powers. There's so many takeaways to take from this situation. Of course, there's the fact that African people are really the ones owed compensation. When we talk about compensation, when we talk about reparations, when we talk about the fact that we have an entire world where African people have been used, taken advantage of, stolen from for the benefit of Western capitalism, when we look at that and the fact that we're still at a disadvantage because of it, obviously we are the ones that are owed reparations. We're owed reparations for colonialism. We're owed reparations for slavery. We're owed reparations for all the types of genocide that has been inflicted upon our people. So despite the fact that we are, I would say, the most, if this is a word, the most owed, or we are owed the most of any other people, we have gotten nothing. No matter how many times we have tried to get reparations, we're always pushed back. And anytime we have a country or a class of African people saying we are owed reparations for this past wrong, we've always been denied. So it's crazy that we have been denied, and yet you have one of us, even though he's obviously not working for us, he's working for them, but one of us who would try to give reparations to the people who have caused the most pain to us to date. This is the best example of colonialism that you can have. And we have to understand, if there's anything we have to take away from this video, number one is that Africa is still 100% colonized. Don't get confused with these leaders. Don't be confused with these people who say, oh, we've been independent since 1980 and we're going to have a big festival for it and we're going to have a big march and a big parade to celebrate independence. No, they're very much still colonized. And so what we have to start talking about is, how do we undo colonialism? And of course, the Federation of African Liberation, we have stated that the best way to do that is to take the control out of the hands of these puppets like Mnangagwa, like so many of the African leaders, whether it's in Cameroon, whether it's in the Congo, Kagame, like, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, we have to take the power out of these people's hands. We have to take the power out of the hands of the people who can make independent decisions about our well-being, and instead give that power to the people who actually are being affected the most. Because as I stated, in Zimbabwe, the people are dying, they're starving, they're dealing with all types of economic collapse. And yet this decision is being done by the government that they have to pay taxes to, that they have to live inside of and obey. And this decision is being done despite the fact that they are the ones who are suffering from these decisions. So if anything, the people who should control these decisions should be the collective of Zimbabwe. It should be the collective of these different places, whether it's with BIA, different African leaders who are taking advantage of the people. It has to be collectively done by the people and not done by the individuals who don't have the interest of the people in mind. So this is obviously a disappointment, you know, but understand also that these people are acting in the interest of their true bosses. They're not acting in the interest of African people. So if anything, we have to have conversations about how do we reestablish that the people as being the main arbiter of these types of deals or agreements with these outside governments, of being the main arbiter of their own destiny. That is what self-determination is. You can't say that you have self-determination when one person gets elected and gets to determine what happens to all these people, what happens to the whole country, and give reparations to the same people who actually cause the pain and the economic catastrophe that exists inside of that country. That is the situation that we have today because we haven't gotten control. So let's start talking about control, and let's talking about how we can get it back for our people. So that's all I have today. I would love to see your comments, and I hope to see you also on the live stream this Saturday, where we start applying the principles of Kwame Nkrumah to today's Pan-Africanism. We will see you all in another video.